Delighted to say, still with me in the studio, Wallis, journalist and author. You'll know him well as a guest on the show. Delighted to have you in the studio with us. Where do we start? Can we just start? I know you do a lot of international affairs. You're a very, very experienced foreign affairs journalist, which has stood you in good stead in the last year doing covering things. But just on that social media ban, just talking to a professor. It seems like it always, when we talk about children, we always have to we go safety first, and we go ban. Whether it's whether it's the vapes, whether it's social media, whether it's phones, whatever it is, ban, safety. Are you at all wary of that as someone who's got teenage children?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a deeper thing going on here, which is the movement of the responsibility for parenting from parents to the state. And we saw that with the children, with the story about the children going to school without even being toilet trained. I mean, use that term for a puppy, but they can't even, and unable to open a book. They think that they can just tap it in, open it. They haven't seen a book in their lives. And we see it again in the government having to ban social media because the parents aren't able to control their own children, raise them in a healthy environment to know how to use social media safely and responsibly.
Do you think most parents can do that? I don't think most parents even know what social media their kids are on.
In the background of all of this, there's two things. I think one is addiction, not just for the kids, but also for the adults and the parents. If you're addicted yourself, how can you then encourage your kids or show them how not to be addicted? And that's because we don't see social media as a toxic danger because it's so recently been invented and overwhelmed all of us.
I've genuinely had to sort of wean myself off.
Exactly, it's difficult. But the other thing I think is lockdown, because lockdown turned social media and phones and devices for all children into something that some parents were able to limit, to suddenly it was the only way they could communicate with their friends and with the outside world. So it was open season for all devices. And then, 2 or 3 years on, you then got a whole cohort of addicted kids and addicted adults, and I think winding back, putting the toothpaste back in the tube after that is very difficult indeed. But the solution cannot be just to hand it all over to the government. We've got to restore our culture, restore our sense of parenting and our discipline over ourselves, over our parents, over our lives.
And I think it's over ourselves first, because again, it's just so much easier. And you see people in restaurants. And, I'm a very good, big believer. You're on a long haul flight. Everyone, get your iPads out, headphones in, shush. We're going to get through it. But again, sitting at the table, everyone's sitting on their different devices, no one talking. For me also, it's what kids are not doing because they're on their phones. When they're sitting in their rooms on their phones, or the worst is you see a bunch of teenagers and they're sitting around with each other and they're all sitting looking at their phones. They're not having banter, they're not learning social interaction, they're not, flirting with each other, teasing each other, they're not playing sport, they're not just learning in human interaction. And then everyone wonders why when they turn up, at university or in the workplace, they can't cope because they haven't learned any of these tools. This is an abject failure of the state. It's an abject failure of parenting. And you say, the state taking over a lot of the parents' jobs, and it seems to me like when you've got parents sending their kids to school who aren't potty trained, toilet trained, you are literally, you have millions of parents who genuinely are too lazy, who are quite happy to go, not my problem. I mean, the idea that you want to spend money on nappies any longer than you have to is utterly bizarre to me. But there are a lot of really lazy, bad parents out there.
But it's part of a whole overall culture. There's a lot of people who are out of work, who are and kids being brought up in generations, in houses, families in which generations have all lived on the dole. So these are people where their world is defined by being given something for nothing. And it's only a small step from thinking, well, the state's paying for everything, to, well, why can't the state look after my kids? And, my kids aren't potty trained, that's that's the state's fault. My kids are social media addicted, that's the state's fault to deal with, the responsibility to deal with.
But also, I don't mind my kid being social media addicted because they got me old phone or somehow, got off the back of a lorry. And I don't have to talk to my kids.
I mean, it's an overall cultural collapse. I think we've lost touch with our old values, our old community structures, our old sense of duty. We lost touch with it via the growth of the state and, of course, the rise of technology.
But also hierarchy. I mean, genuinely, I really think this is a really big issue. The notion that, the notion that when you're a 25-year-old, you get to tell your boss where you work. whether you work from home or not, or whether you come in on a Monday because it's raining or you don't feel well. The idea that you get to decide whether or not your kid goes to school on a Monday morning because they don't. The idea that the parents can't tell the kids what to do. I'm utterly flabbergasted by parents. I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea that I wouldn't be able to say to my child, when she was younger, no, you can't have those sweets at the aisle by the till, and not expect a tantrum. I mean, I'm known in my local supermarket. People have got their kids doing that screamy tantrum. Are you in pain? Have you fallen? No. Well, then shut up. Be quiet. And people are going, no, seriously, I don't want to listen to it. Have you ever actually tried telling your kids, be quiet? I don't want to hear it.
Exactly. I mean,
and then people think you're this terrible person. No, parents who do not discipline their children properly, and I've never hit my child, never would, blah, 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 but parents who don't understand that they are in charge, and it's not just the state of affairs. It is a good thing that they are in charge because it is their job to raise a child into being a useful, happy, healthy, hard-working, contributing adult. That is your job. If you don't want to do that job, use contraception. It's freely available. Do not have a child, really. But if you're going to do that job, you want to become a parent, you need to do your job properly. You really need to do your job properly. You have a duty to your child. The parents I know who don't do discipline properly, they spend more time telling their children off than the parents who do, because their kids don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Do a whole 3 hours on this, guys.
Yeah, I mean, partly we're still seeing the collapse or the inversion of authority that started with the sexual revolution. Everything was turned upside down, and we're still trying to work out where we are in terms of parenting and society and that. But also, I think we're seeing the collapse of social responsibility, one person to another. I mean, you being in a supermarket and disciplining somebody else's kid is anathema to most people in Britain.
We're
just totally siloed.
Another adult will come up and clip you around the ear if you were misbehaving.
In cultures all over the world, whether it's in Southern Europe, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's elsewhere, there's a sense of communal responsibility for each other's kids. Even in Japan, young kids walk to school by themselves and strangers help them to cross the road because they feel a sense of family of the nation. We've lost that sense of responsibility for each other's kids. And when you lose responsibility for each other in that way, everything gets palmed off to the state, and then your country becomes weak because the country is only as strong as the constituency of people within it.
Absolutely.
That leads us to overall failure.
It's weird because it sounds like a really minor story, but it's actually quite big picture. And a lot of it comes down to, say, that cultural decline that we've got. And the people who are laughing at that most, as we know, let's go back onto the big picture globally, your real area of expertise. And that is, the Chinese and the Russians who are just... I mean, they must be sitting there with the popcorn in Beijing and Moscow just going, oh, what have they done now? So we've got the complete sort of fragmenting of NATO over not just Donald Trump's failure to sort of, to back Europe on Ukraine as solidly as we would have hoped, but over these threats to Greenland. We had threats of tariffs to 8 members of NATO, including ourselves. That's now been dropped. I mean, literally what Donald Trump was saying, on Air Force One over to Davos, and more he was saying last night, complete U-turn. So we're not going to see tariffs, for now. Was not going to be taking of Greenland by a military force. What do we think the deal is? Because certainly the latest articles I've seen, he'd not actually spoken to the Danes about it, but I think he's had a long conversation with the Trump whisperer, Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO. But what do we think the deal actually involves?
Well, we don't really know. All we know at the moment is that the American bases will become American soil. So a bit like the deal that Britain has in Cyprus. Whether they'll be able to then use that American soil to mine down into Greenland's rare earth deposits, we don't know. Greenland is 8th in the world with 1.5 million tonnes of rare earths.
We know they're there, but they're under frozen tundra, basically.
Exactly, but accessible with enough determination, from iron ore, graphite to gold, which perhaps attracts Donald Trump. He's a big fan of gold.
That's like gold. He likes gold too much.
So that could be part of it. But it's worth bearing in mind that Greenland sits at exactly the midpoint between Russia and American soil. I mean that in a war, any missiles going from Russia into America have to pass over Greenland, and that's why it's always been a station for radar bases. It's got security significance because of that. With Trump's Golden Dome idea, speaking of gold again, a missile defence.
Well, explain what that is, because it's basically a version of the Iron Dome over Israel.
Yeah, so in Israel, it's got a few different missile defence systems, but the most famous one is Iron Dome, which stops short-range missiles from coming in by shooting them out of the sky. Amazing. It's like shooting one bullet with another bullet. Technology they said could never work. They managed to get it to work. America wants to to do a similar thing on a larger scale called Golden Dome. America actually, funnily enough, the IDF developed the technology with American funding on condition that America could then own the rights to the intellectual property. But
America is rather bigger than Israel, and therefore they need to be taking missiles coming from further away. They need to be doing it rather higher up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's got other systems like Arrow, David Sling, that sort of thing with bigger missiles, and so America's going to be basically working on that to produce a bigger system.
But it's real. This isn't sci-fi. This is real.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost sci-fi because it's got to do with space as well. It's got satellites involved and all sorts of things. So it's very ambitious. But Greenland, weirdly enough, this big, beautiful chunk of ice, as Donald Trump has called it, seems like a backwater and totally irrelevant, but actually is key to this strategy.
And especially also, we know with the North Atlantic and these routes and as we see the ice melting. Which, by the way, is happening because we're coming out of an ice age. It's what is happening.
Not because of aerosols.
No, there used to be ice between. There used to be ice over the Channel as well. Do you see how it's climate changes? It's what it does. I want to talk more about international affairs. Just got some more news closer to home. Andrew Gwynn, who was a Labour MP for Gorton and Denton in the northwest, he was sacked as a health minister a while back over offensive WhatsApp messages. I mean, who isn't sacked over offensive WhatsApp messages? It's only a matter of time until you lose me for those. But we understand that he is to stand down as an MP, making way for, guess who? Andy Burnham, the King of the North, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, to run for his seat. There's been a lot of speculation that he would stand down to allow Andy Burnham a return to the House of Commons. He's been denying that in recent weeks, but the expectation is that with an awful lot of support on the National Executive Committee, NEC, that decides who's going to actually run for a seat, and Lucy Powell, of course, as now deputy. This is Lucy Powell, Lucy's the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Another no-mark Labour person. I'm sorry, but they all look the same. They all run into each other. Giving help that actually, if we have a by-election, as we will now have, Andrew Gwynn's seat would go to Andy Burnham. Your reaction to this, Jake Wallis-Simons, because the big thing about the threat to Keir Starmer after trouncing at the local elections, assuming any local elections go ahead, they're trying to cancel them all or they'll do badly, is that, well, the most one of the most popular people to stand against him would be Andy Burnham, but he's not even an MP anymore. Yeah, I mean, this has been a long time in coming. In fact, I had a conversation with a Labour figure just the other day. Wasn't it Clive Lewis who was talking about standing down to give Andy Burnham a run? And this Labour figure was talking about, there's any number of Labour MPs who are willing to stand down for the sake of giving Andy Burnham an in to challenge Starmer. So it's been a long time in coming. If I know about it, then definitely the government knows about it. You'd have thought. But it's interesting that Starmer hasn't been able to take strong action to stop this from happening in the same way that Kemi did with the defection of Robert Jenrick, who was on this programme. But ultimately, the Labour leadership, we've seen this again and again, I mean, often, especially with candidate selection, when there's an election that's been called, right, no, we're parachuting people in. But there has been this concern that actually in a lot of the seats that in the Manchester area, actually red wall seats that have gone to Labour, but actually very likely to go to Reform, were there to be an election. I mean, Reform would throw everything at such a by-election. Tories, who were king, loads of Tory voters would go, right, whoever's will vote Reform. You know perfectly well they would if they got a chance to oust Labour from that seat. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I mean, I think it's very clear that Keir Starmer is gasping for his life. He's a wounded animal, and it's really a matter of when, not if, I think, the knife goes into his back or even to his front. There are so many people who want to get rid of him because he is probably the worst Prime Minister we've ever had. So bad. Is that an exaggeration? Worst Prime Minister we've ever had? I mean, did you see PMQs yesterday? Well, it's certainly according to the polls, PMQs yesterday, and lots of people say we had rather good PMQs. I don't think it was Kemi Badenoch's best, certainly. But it was just, I'm very, very clear, and we're standing. It just, I mean, this idea that he's sort of standing up to Donald Trump. We will not yield. His spin doctor to come up with that phrase, I will not yield. And it was funny because in the reporting of it, it was remarked upon with some hilarity that this was the first time he hasn't actually U-turned on something. And that's because Donald Trump did it for him. Exactly. None of it really tallies, does it? Where we are. Well, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that seat. And again, this idea that Andy Burnham Burnham would change things. And it is absolutely fascinating. People saying Keir Starmer is this absolutely awful Prime Minister. I don't think there's anyone, well, according to a poll, 18% of people positive ratings for him, 75% against. Others like, I don't know, I don't care. We've worked out the 18%. That's train drivers, junior doctors, other people in public sector jobs who've had a big pay rise. Well, certainly more than people in the private sector have had. Well, no, they're all voting green.
Students,
and people on benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, they love him. They absolutely love him. But I'm not sure that's the future for a country. But whoever takes over from him, they're not going to be more sane. It's going to be, Angie Rayner, Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, I think, is a great mayor. But if you actually look at the policies he would pursue, he's talked about, we are talking about moving massively to the left. Ed Miliband having more power. He's a complete, zealot on net zero. We are talking about things getting a hell of a lot worse. I'm talking about getting out of the frying pan, guys, into a very, very, very big inferno-like fire.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that the problem isn't the personality. I mean, yes, the personality is a problem, but that's not the core problem. The core problem is that they're all leftists, and they're going to drive our country into the ground, as the leftists always do.
But they're not even competent leftists.
Over the years.
I could deal with competent leftists.
And I just think back to the last general election, where the phrase I heard again and again when people were thinking of casting their vote was, the Tories have messed things up over 14 years. Let's give Labour a go. How much worse could it get? And now we're finding out. And I think we're going to find out that it could get a lot worse than even we are today before it starts to get better.
It's another happy Thursday, folks. Another happy Thursday.
Yeah, nice and cheerful.
11:20.